What's kicking, everybody? We are back for another episode of Pickin' Fights. I'm Keith, joined as always by Tom. Tom, how are you today, brother?
I'm doing well in a new environment. It seems like these days my background and my environment that I'm streaming the show and talking to all the fans at home from is consistently changing and evolving. Hopefully, it is getting better with each iteration. This time I'm on my own Wi-Fi, my own singular Wi-Fi. Nobody else is pulling on it. So hopefully we have a much more seamless stream for UFC 275, Jiri Procházka versus Glover Teixeira. I think there's going to be some interesting points that we're going to make that people, maybe hadn't thought of, maybe had thought of, but I see a lot of people expecting Jiri Procházka to go out there and take Glover's head off, and I'm just not so sure about that. We also have Weili Zhang, Zhang Weili versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who I personally cannot stand. Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I find her supremely annoying. And I like Weili Zhang and her commitment to the craft. But that doesn't necessarily mean I'm picking Zhang Weili. I don't always pick with my feelings. And then finally, one of the more of the top three build most interesting fights on the card. We have the Queen of Violence, Valentina Shevchenko, taking on potentially the Queen of KOs, Talia Santos. So excited to talk about all of those fights with you, Keith. How are you doing today, buddy?
Oh, I'm great. Before we get into everything, I just want to remind the people at home, please like this video. Give us a comment down below while we're live. We'll answer you while we're going. And please subscribe to the channel because it really helps us out a lot over here at Pickin' Winners. I just want to let everybody know, breaking news today, they found out that 63 Congress members were found violating the Stock Act, using insider trading to make stock decisions, not reporting their stocks. So if Congress people can use inside information to make money, we can help you use inside information to make money. That's why you got to subscribe. Stay up to date with what we're telling you. We're right a lot of the time. So yeah, let's dive into this one. I'm super excited for this card. We'll kick it off as we always do with our prelim locks. And my first one is going to be Andre Fialho. I like Andre Fialho. He's been pretty entertaining. He's been super active recently. I believe he's fought. This is now his fourth fight in the calendar year, and that's great for him. That's incredible activity. He won his last two fights over really solid competition, especially I like Miguel Baeza, and he had a really good knockout over Miguel Baeza. Miguel Baeza is way better than his recent fights would indicate, too. And this is Fialho's, well, like I said, fourth in the calendar year. But then you look at Matthews, he's had a year off almost. Fialho has serious KO power. His last two wins were by knockout. And Fialho really specializes in his stand-ups, and his fights get super intense. That's why they've had him in there with guys like Baeza, Michel Pereira. So he gets super intense. It can be a war sometimes, an absolute stand-up war. And then you compare that to Jake Matthews, who really isn't as powerful as Fialho. He's not really super great in any particular area. And Jake Matthews can be a little bit chinny from time to time. What do you think about that pick, Tom?
Yeah, I like that pick. I think specifically in order to beat Andre Fialho, you have to be a specialist in some area, whether that's going to be taking him down and controlling him on the ground, or a supreme specialist that's able to outwit him on the feet. You're going to have to strategize and specialize and be really, really good in one specific area to beat Andre Fialho. And I just don't think, I just don't think that is something that. That Jake Matthews, sorry. I don't think that's something that Jake Matthews possesses. I think that, he's a solid fighter, but like you said, with the time off, the activity of Andre Fialho, and the relative minimal damage that Fialho is taking in those four fights to date. This will be his fifth fight in the calendar year. We're only in June. I wonder how many fights could you possibly have in a single year? I would love if anyone in the comment section or watching this knows, or look it up afterwards. What is the most fights that a singular fighter has had in the modern era, as they call it in the NFL? I like what you're doing. I like what you're thinking there. As for my own prelim lock, I think I am going to have to go with, drum roll please, I'm going to go with Dana Baccarel over Kyung Ho Kang. Dana Baccarel has some serious power and a finishing ability, specifically his left hook. He's got, of his last five fights, his last three wins coming two of them coming by left hook. One was a straight left hook, one was a counter left hook. And then the other win, finish on the ground with knees to elbows. So I like his finishing ability, specifically the ground and pound. And I think Kyung-Ho Kang, that's a big weakness of his. His most recent loss is coming a split decision against the aging Rani Yahya. And, if you're going to have a loss to Rani Yahya, especially at this stage of his career, I'm not sure that I can trust you for the longevity to go to get a ton of wins. I also think in this card, being in Singapore, being something that the UFC is trying to grow their base out there with, I think that they are trying to put guys that are going to be recognizable to the Singapore and that, Asian crowd, East Asian crowd. And I think this is going to be a highlight for, I think there's going to be a highlight here for Dana Baccarel to go out there and finish in spectacular fashion. Kyung-Ho Kang, 17-9 on his career. Not a crazy amount of success inside of the UFC, and I think this is where Dana Baccarel gets a name for himself. What do you think about that one, Keith?
I like the pick a lot with Dana Baccarel. And, you can't be losing to Rani Yahya, 40 whatever years old. He is, he's decent, but if you want to be a promising UFC fighter with a career going for you, Rani Yahya is not the guy that you want to be losing to. I've got my next and final prelim lock, and I'm taking Brendan Allen. And he's coming up against Jacob Malkoun. And this one's just, it seems a little bit obvious. And that's because Allen can do it all. And, his real specialty, though, is grappling. He's so big for this division. Malkoun is another guy that likes to grapple when he absolutely has to. But Allen is so much better in that realm because it's what he specializes in. Allen also has really good cardio for his size. He's got solid striking. And I think, based on Allen's size, the cardio, all those things going for him, if Malkoun tries to hang with him on the ground, especially, because Malkoun does like to shoot takedowns when things aren't going his way on the feet. If he tries to hang with Brendan Allen on the ground, it's going to be a long night for Malkoun. So Brendan Allen, I like this pick a lot. I just want to check the lines. I'm pretty interested in this one because, in my mind, Brendan Allen should be a heavy favorite, and he is somewhat of a moderate favorite. Coming into this one at minus 255 to Jacob Malkoun's plus 205. So, I like the Brendan Allen pick a lot here. If I had to pick a method, I'd probably go with decision. But, anything could happen in there. What do you think of that one, Tom?
Yeah, Brendan Allen is a guy who the UFC is trying to push right now. He's another guy who's been fairly active inside of the UFC, and up until this point, I think Jacob Malkoun, you don't want to necessarily sleep on him. He's someone who definitely has a lot of positives when looking at his skill set. He's a guy who's adept on the ground. He is a decent on the feet. He has the loss against Phil Hawes, which I think was just more of a product of him being a little bit nervous for his first fight inside of the UFC. But ultimately, when it comes to comparing him against all-in Brendan Allen, fighting out of Sidell, Louisiana, with his fight camp being Rufus Sport. He's going to have the reach advantage. He's going to have the height advantage. He's big for the division. And also, I think important to note, this fight is at 185, and Brendan Allen typically fights at 205 and has wins at 205. Most recently, submission win over Sam Alvey, which at this point doesn't really weigh a lot, but he's got that loss to Chris Curtis via punches and knees, TKO on the ground and pound. But we know Chris Curtis has been streaking as of relatively late in the UFC and is a pretty heavy guy as well. So I like Brendan Allen as long as he doesn't have any issues with that weight cut. I see Brendan Allen going in there and getting the decision here. Any other prelim locks for you, Keith?
No, I'm good. Those are my two. How about you?
All right. No, that's it. I like, I think this card for a numbered card for a UFC that is trying to break into Singapore. I think it is a little bit light on the star power. Of course, styles make fights, but I think they're going to have a lot of difficulties pulling in that American audience and getting people excited who aren't, really, really invested in these fighters. And I have to tell you, some of these fighters coming over here, and we'll see it more on the main card, have a lot more of that experience in the East Asian. I don't want to call it a circuit because it's way bigger than a circuit, but definitely in that Eastern Asian, MMA world, that sphere is where they're more notable. So interesting design by the UFC. I would think that they would want to maybe have a little bit of a clash between, guys that would be notable to the East Asian population, and then, some of the people over here to try and draw as much money as possible. Now, remember, this is a fight, or this is a card that I think was supposed to have Paulo Costa on it before it got moved. Or no, it was supposed to have Robert Whittaker versus Marvin Vettori on it. And that was going to carry a lot of that star power. Of course, with the UFC, when they're putting these cards together, they have to think about money and who's getting paid and what. So I think putting it together, having Marvin Vettori and Robert Whittaker commanding a lot of the revenue share, and then subsequently having that fight be moved, I think is going to overall impact the star power and the notable names behind it. But nevertheless, still pretty decent with the main 3 fights. But before we get into those, let's get to the first fight on the main card. That is JackDella Maddalena versus Ramazan Emeev. And I'll kick it over to you, Keith. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I'll start off by saying I'm taking JackDella Maddalena. He has a lot of promise. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of regional guys on this, or regional fighters on this card, right? We have some from the Asian area. We've got some coming over from Australia. That's why Robert Whittaker would have been on here, because Singapore from Australia is a little hop, skip, and a jump on a little plane. So, JackDella Maddalena, he's one of these Australian guys on this card. He's got a 5-fight win streak going for him right now, possibly more. But, you go back into his history, it's a lot of W's there. 10-year age gap between him and Emeev. So I believe Emeev is coming in at 35. JackDella Maddalena is 25. Jack has great defensive grappling. He can scramble really well, escape bad positions very well on the ground. And that works well for him here because Ramazan Emeev is an Eastern European. He's a Dagestani, wrestle-heavy guy. But he starts very slow in his fights. And that doesn't favor him at all in this matchup because Jack starts incredibly fast. And he looks for as many upper hands as he can grab early in his matchups. So, yeah, and the fact that Jack is coming from Australia to Singapore as opposed to Emeev, who is coming from Russia, it's, a slightly shorter trip from Australia to Singapore than Russia, but it is in a similar time zone. So that is, something we got to keep an eye out for. It's something that we spoke about before this. It's really going to factor in for these fighters that are in this region. They're going to be in the same time zone. It's not like when, Kai Kara France, who's from Australia, he usually fights in Vegas. It's not like when he has to come 2 weeks before to just completely acclimate himself to, the time zone in Las Vegas. So there's a lot of advantages for JackDella Maddalena in this one. And I think, he's a very clear pick for a lot of reasons. But Vegas doesn't think so because they have him only at a -135 favorite as opposed to Emeev, who is +115. I like the JackDella Maddalena money line in this one a lot because he can get it done in a few different ways. What do you think about this one, Tom?
You hit the nail right on the head, and we are going to do what's called a super lock, which is when on the main card. Now, stick with us. We're still working on the graphics and seeing if maybe we could do something a little bit more fun than just throwing up a banner here. But JackDella Maddalena versus Ramazan Emeev is going to be a super lock. And the reason for that is because me and Keith are in agreement for a fight on the main card. JackDella Maddalena, I think, has a lot more versatility when it comes to the fight. He's going to be somebody who's, like you said, Keith, coming from Australia, hop, skip, and a jump right over, which is going to help him in terms of acclimating to maybe the environment, the time zone, and all of that. I think Ramazan Emeev has had some weaknesses, most recently in his loss that came to Danny Roberts via split decision 7 months ago. Now, I'm not one who's quick to bet against any Russian fighter because there's not much to do in Russia other than train and then train, maybe drink a little bit of vodka and then train some more. So I am always going to be hesitant, but looking at Tapology, 80% of the voters are on JackDella Maddalena, and when the line is so even for Vegas, that makes me really, really tempted to go with the JackDella Maddalena pick. His name is much more fun to say, and I recognize his his ability to have the counter left TKO on people who are going to be coming in on him. win competitive decisions against Ange Looser to get into the UFC from Dana White's Contender Series. He's a little bit of the younger guy. They're about going to be the same size. He's going to have a 5.5-inch reach advantage. And then Ramazan Emeev, as you age, he's 35 years old now, getting towards the end of his prime here. So a lot of more concerns on the side of Ramazan Emeev: travel, age, styles make fights with the counter hooks, and the ability to handle himself on the ground. And then the juicy line and the spread between Tapology, all are going to lead me, the reach advantage, the youth, all going to lead me towards picking JackDella Maddalena. Is there anything else that I missed?
No, you hit the nail on the head as well. Great pick.
Oh, awesome.
I love that super lock.
You and me should take a trip to Home Depot since we're just a couple of handy men here. Moving on up the card, we have Rogerio Bontorin versus Manel Cape. Depends on who you talk to. I think it's the Anik and Florian podcast. If you don't watch that, definitely check it out. They do a pronunciation of the week. Apparently, they say it's Cape. I've heard way more people call it Manel Cape. Manel Cape was most recently supposed to be on an earlier card, I think 1 or 2 weeks ago, but ended up testing positive for a picogram of a metabolite. Now, he says that it was in something, and obviously if USADA is gonna, well, I guess USADA doesn't come into. Does USADA play? I mean, if they're outside of the USA, is USADA still playing a factor here? I know that they allegedly send some fighter or send somebody, no matter who that is, out to Thailand to check out those guys over there. But if you're Bobby Green, you don't think that actually happens or not. I don't know. But that being said, I like Manel Cape here. I think he's got a lot of good things going for him. My computer is being really slow, not pulling up the notes that I had on it. So I'm going to pass it over to you real quick. Hope that you can stall for me while I get my thoughts together.
Oh, absolutely. I'll stall for you, in the best way that I possibly can with my notes. So Manel Cape. I'm just going to call him Manel for all intents and purposes. Listen, I'm going with Manel here. And important to note, he is from Ryzen. That's where he was before he signed to the UFC. That's the promotion he fought in. Ryzen is very heavy over in, they're Asian-based, but they're massive in Singapore. So it was a really smart decision to put him on this card. He's had a lot of activity since the UFC signed him. He's been putting on really nice creative performances since the UFC signed him as well. He had a flying knee knockout over Ode Osborne and a really solid knockout over our friend Zuglis, who, Zuglis gave, who was it? Jeff Molina gave him a pretty good fight last week. Manel has a really good matchup here against Rogerio Bontorin. Bontorin likes to do things like clinch, and Manel has really good defense against the clinch, as well as Manel is better in striking, and he's really creative, like I mentioned. Bontorin can also be chinny at times. He does get wobbled, and he has been finished once or twice in his last 5. One of them was to my guy Teixeira France. So with Manel's power and creativity, I really think there's a really high chance that he finishes Bontorin on his feet. I'm riding high on the Manel train this week. Cape. What do you think about that one, Tom?
Well, this is going to be another super lock because I'm right there with you. Manel Cape, I think, is going to take this one. The people on Tapology, 80% of them are agreeing with us that Manel Cape is going to take this one. There's a lot of the reasons that you already said, but I like Manel Cape's finishing ability. He was in the Ryzen promotion. He had fought a lot of really, really good guys over there. So he's used to fighting out of Singapore and fighting in Eastern Asia. Rogerio Bontorin from Brazil, so still having to fly halfway across the world and kind of adapt there. He's also a guy, like you said, has been finished recently. Brandon Royval split decision 4 months ago. Teixeira France, TKO a year ago. A year before that, got finished by Ray Borg. So not phenomenal. Looking at his 5 on in, he did beat Julian Paiva, but that one was due to a doctor's stoppage. So had that not been the case, I would like to see of where the rest of that fight would have gone. Julian Paiva, historically a tough guy, but Manel Cape, his most recent wins, Zagla Sumagulov had a really good fight against El Jefe Jeff. I'm blanking on his last name. Molina. El Jefe, Jeff Molina. So we saw Zaglas Lumagulov go on and have didn't get finished by El Jefe, who had finished a lot of people up until that point. He also has a recent win over O'Day Osborne, who we saw just have an amazing knockout win and have almost an even better post-fight interview. O'Day, 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 O'Day. I could get behind that chant almost anything that it's for. So I like the history of Manel Kape. He looking at some of his losses inside of the UFC, split decision over Matheus Nicolau, very, very close fight, 15-2-1 was that fighter. And then, taking that fight only 1 month following a loss to Alexander Pantoja, which was his first fight in the United States, in the UFC. So quick turnaround for him there. Definitely contributed to that split decision. I think if he had maybe waited just a little bit longer, he might have been on a 3-fight win streak and have a record of 18-5 coming into this one. He's going to have a 1-inch reach advantage and be about 2 years younger than Rogerio Bontorin. So for all of those reasons, I'm going with you, and I'm going with Manel Kape.
Yeah, great pick. Really like Manel. Excited to see what he does this weekend. So next up, we've got a rematch of probably one of the most brutal women's fights of all time in the UFC, and that's Weili Zhang, Zhang Weili, however you want to put it, versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Honestly, when you look at these names, right, like Weili Zhang and Zhang Weili, because she's from China, those get flipped back and forth, and then you look at Jędrzejczyk, where did they pull that Jędrzejczyk? I mean, come on. Get better names, people. So
you don't know how hard it was to find the little thing to go under the E, and get that to show on the streaming platform here. Some of these names, unfortunately Jiri Procházka, if you look at his name, there's a bunch of little I think it's called an emthand or something. It's something that in English we don't have a word for, but he has a bunch of them on his name, and I'll pop it up here real quick. Yeah, sorry. Unfortunately, Jiří does not get the benefit that Joanna Jędrzejczyk gets with the little end band or whatever it is on the E. But personally, I like Zhang Weili better than Weili Zhang. So maybe they're onto something, Keith.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, listen, if you don't want to call her Joanna Jędrzejczyk, or if you couldn't get those letters up, you could always call her what Colby calls her, Joanna the Booby Lady. So that's one of my favorite Colby nicknames of all time. But just to break this one down for you, Weili Zhang has been so much more active. She fought Rose twice, within the past year. And Joanna's been off traveling the world since the last time she fought Weili Zhang. Zhang has elevated her level of grappling or her level of training since they last met. She's been going all over. She went to go train in Arizona with Henry Cejudo. She did a lot of grappling, way more grappling than she's ever done in her entire career in order to prepare for Thug Rose. And then, you look at Joanna, you look at the Booby Lady in comparison, and she stayed at ATT. And ATT fighters are on a bit of a downward trend right now, as opposed to where they used to be, right? You look at Dustin, he lost to Charles, George. A lot of these ATT fighters are not being held up on that pedestal like they used to. And I think Joanna is going to be another ATT fighter to, continue that American top team losing streak. Then, you got to look at the matchup the last time around, right? Joanna left that one with a loss, and she also left with her skull just filled up with blood. She looked like an alien. She didn't even look like the same person. She looked like she had a defect that was going to stay with her for the rest of her life. And, that was a 5-round fight. And I think that 5-round fight benefited Joanna quite a bit more as opposed to Weili because of her pacing. She's not as powerful. She throws a lot of, she tries to win by decision. So she doesn't expend her energy very much. And then you look at Zhang Weili and the power that she has in her strikes. When she fights in 5-round fights, we saw this against Rose. We saw this in the 5-rounder against Joanna the last time. We didn't see it in the first 5-rounder against Rose because that ended with Weili getting thumped right in the head. But when Weili does go for 5 rounds, she's very conservative of her energy so that she can maintain her power going later into the fight. I think in this one, because it's 3 rounds, and we haven't really seen Weili fight in a 3-round fight in a while, but because it's 3 rounds, we're going to see her coming out the gun, throwing heavy, heavy shots, just looking to put Joanna away very quickly. And we saw what she did to her head when she wasn't trying to just put her away and expend her energy. So a 3-round fight really benefits Weili Zhang here. I'm riding with Weili. As much as it pains me, I don't like either of them, but I do lean a little bit more towards Joanna because, I mean, she's the booby lady. But yeah, I have to take Weili Zhang in this one. Zhang Weili. I think it's the smart pick. And I think it's going to be very clear at the end of this one, whether it ends within the time or it goes a full 15 minutes. I think it's going to be a very clear victory for Weili Zhang. What do you think about that one, Tom?
Yeah, it's really interesting because Joanna Jędrzejczyk, we talked about her taking 2 years off, but we've seen a lot of fighters, especially later in their careers, when they have established skill sets, especially strikers, being able to take extended periods of time off and come back and still be on top of their game. Dominic Cruz comes to mind, Max Holloway comes to mind, not necessarily with the extended time off, but the lack of sparring, the lack of activity. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, with that hematoma that was on her head, she had to take a lot of time off to make sure that healed properly. And she's been training over the past year or two, so it's not like she hasn't been doing nothing, and she's totally coming in blind. And then also you have Zhang Weili, who's been very active since that fight, getting knocked out, fighting, a 5-round fight with Rose Namajunas. There is the potential that because of all the rest that Joanna has coming into this and the subsequent activity that Zhang Weili has had, that could play a factor here. Now, will Zhang Weili appear tired and sluggish? I don't think so. But, there could be just that little bit of edge that she had lost, and Joanna can come in there and capitalize on that. Plus, Zhang Weili, she had spent so much time focusing and training and preparing for Rose Namajunas, who, is a little bit more of a tactical fighter who presents a little bit of a different challenge than Joanna Jędrzejczyk does. So then switching back over to her, changing all of those camps, it's quite possible that, she's going to have that paralysis by analysis a little bit, where she's, just kind of lost in what her style is. Is she able to get back to her roots and fight from a comfortable perspective after those 2 losses? And, now that she's potentially facing a 3-fight losing streak, not a 3-fight losing streak, but it would be really the only losing streak she's ever had to experience. I'm really interested to see how that all plays with Zhang Weili. That being said, I am going to pick, drumroll please, Zhang Weili, making this one a super lock again. We are 3 for 3 on the main card. The reason for that is I think that ultimately the time off is not going to benefit Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I think, her best performances are behind her. I like her, performances where in my computer would just load, guess not. Either way, I think, that hematoma split decision loss to Zhang Weili was, it took a lot out of her. And a lot of times when we see fighters go through wars, they're never quite the same. Win before that was Michelle Waterson, which isn't a bad win, but hasn't quite aged that well. She's got the loss to Valentina Shevchenko. She has a win over Tecia Torres, which Tecia Torres still doing well, but that's, we're 3 years removed. You also have to figure that Joanna Jędrzejczyk has been all over the map on this beach, on that beach, showing off her abs and, being that more attempting to be that personality / supermodel type and leaning into more of her looks than it is her training. I know that she still trains very, very competitively, but also leading into this fight, they lost her luggage. They canceled her flight. So there's a lot of extra stressors that go in to this fight with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, 2 years removed. Some people don't believe in ring rust. Some people do believe in ring rust. I just think fighting in front of a crowd, a foreign crowd from 2 years removed, against the same fighter. And, to some of the reasons you said, there's going to be a different fight, even though it's against the same fighter, where Joanna Jędrzejczyk's style lends itself to those longer fights where she's able to kind of get into a rhythm, pick apart her opponent, and really start dominating the later 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds. Now that you have Zhang Weili, who it's a 3-round bout, I think she's going to come out with a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm. She's not going to want to go home with a loss. And I think she has a lot more finishing power than Joanna has. So for those reasons, that's why I'm picking Zhang Weili, and this turned itself into a super lock.
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point there too, right? Joanna's fighting in front of a foreign crowd, but also Zhang Weili is fighting in front of a home, potentially friendly crowd too. And we saw after she got knocked out by Rose that she was very affected in that first fight by the atmosphere, the very, pro Rose fan base that was in the stands. So it'll be interesting to see if the opposite effect takes place now when the whole arena in Singapore is screaming for Weili Zhang, if that just amps her up even more as opposed to being discouraged by people booing her. She just goes in there looking to take Joanna's head off and succeeds in doing so. Because she does seem to be what's up, Chance? She does seem to be a fighter that is affected heavily by crowd energy and who's going for who. And then one or two more things. Conspiracy theory: Weili Zhang had someone on her team steal Joanna's luggage, and finally, Joanna did say, and it was like this big deal, like, oh, in that last fight, I lost, but it made me better. The proof is in the pudding, Joanna. It's up to you to prove it. We have absolutely no idea if she's actually going to come into this one better, but Weili Zhang has been active. We know what to expect, and that just makes us ever much more confident in our super lock. So, I'm going to move up now to the first of the two championship fights on this card, and that is Valentina Shevchenko versus Talia Santos. And before I start this one, because I don't have a lot to say, I just want to make note of the fact that Valentina Shevchenko is a minus 630 huge favorite in this fight, as opposed to Talia Santos, who's a plus 450 heavy underdog. We all know, I mean, if you've been watching this sport for any length of time, if you've been following the UFC, or combat sports in general, you know that Valentina Shevchenko is one of the most dominant champions, not only in combat sports, but in sports in general. Talia Santos, yeah, she's had a lot of knockouts on her resume, but Valentina Shevchenko has an answer for everything that every single fighter in the UFC, in the women's featherweight division, I believe, flyweight, in the women's flyweight division has for her. She has an answer for everything, and everyone they put up, it's like dominoes. Everyone they put up against her, that she just knocks them down one by one. She's going to be holding this belt until she retires or until she's 50 and they give Erin Blanchfield a title shot. But yeah, I'm going with Valentina Shevchenko. This isn't going to be a Juliana Pena situation where she comes in and completely upsets Amanda Nunes. This is going to be what we all think and what we all know it's going to be. It's going to be a Valentina Shevchenko victory. Hard to say how she's going to do it because she can do it any which way she wants. She took out Jessica Andrade on the ground, I believe, and just elbowed her face in a crucifix. And then, she took Lauren Murphy to one of the most boring decisions ever in a fight that Andrew Schultz called a dominator versus a diner waitress. So Valentina Shevchenko, another victory for her. Don't see Talia Santos coming out of this one with a belt around her waist. I'd imagine this is going to be another super lock.
Well, hey, listen. Before you go and imagine things and put words into my mouth, I think Talia Santos is going to win.
No.
A round or two. Probably closer to a minute or two. Glad that one played. Yeah, listen, Valentina Shevchenko, there's a reason at the beginning of the show why I called her the queen of violence. Talia Santos, you look at her, she is jacked. She has a lot of cool KOs on her record, but I don't think that's really going to matter against Valentina Shevchenko. You brought up the Jessica Andrade fight. The only reason she as some people call it, wrestle fuck, Jessica Andrade was because she dropped a round or a particular part of a round to Jennifer Maia before that. And people thought they found, a part of her game that was exposed. They thought that, maybe Valentina can't wrestle against the top. She goes, okay, well, give me Jessica Andrade because she's a top wrestler, and I'm going to wrestle her to death. And that's exactly what she did. She went out there and she dominated. So I think Valentina Shevchenko is just proving time and time again that she is the gold standard for women's MMA. I think especially considering that Amanda, I have apparently
Nunes?
early onset Alzheimer's. Yeah, Amanda Nunes. Apparently since Amanda Nunes has been dethroned as the 135-pound champ, I think the opportunity is there for Valentina Shevchenko to stake her claim as the number one GOAT, best women's fighter of all time. I also like her personality a lot more than really any other woman doing it today. I think she is got that humble air of confidence about her, that she believes in herself. She knows her skills, but she can still have fun. She doesn't take herself too seriously. And I think Valentina is just the epitome of what a mixed martial artist is. She's done this for her entire life. She also was a gymnast and a dancer. And we see those dancer combinations with MMA fighters having exceedingly amazing footwork, which is, tried and true with Valentina here. Just beyond that, being a gymnast, being very flexible, getting those, being able to throw head kicks and being able to get out of weird scramble positions. It all just kind of lends itself to making the monster that we have in Valentina Shevchenko. It's why she's a champion, and like you said, I think she's going to be the champion until somebody takes it away from her. I think, when you think about dominant champions inside of the UFC, John Jones comes to mind. But, even in the later parts of his light heavyweight title run, there were some questionable decisions. Alexander Gustafsson comes to mind. Dominic,
Reyes.
Dominic, what was it?
Reyes.
Dominic Reyes comes to mind. I'm telling you, I have something wrong with my brain because these are easy names that I can't get. But those fights come to mind where John Jones was just probably not the victory, even though he was given the fight anyway, or maybe he was, but it was just so close. And, we haven't seen Valentina be in a really close fight in a really long time. She's just always evolving. She's only training once a day now, which I think is going to benefit her longevity because she knows how to fight and she's put it on, and she's down just working on those minutia parts of the game to get a little bit better, 1% better, 0.5% better at the things that she's already, leagues ahead on against anybody else. So I know I did a little bit of the deceptive approach to start this, but yeah, I'm going Valentina Shevchenko. This makes 4 for 4 main card super locks. So, if I was at home, I would be parlaying those 4. Will we go 5 for 5? Keith, what do you think about the main event? Glover Teixeira, Jiri Procházka.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one after Valentina Shevchenko does her little victory dance. Tough fight to pick, though. And that's because, you got to look at the matchup between these two guys. You got Glover Teixeira, who is the oldest first-time champion in UFC history, won it at 42, I believe. Incredible jiu-jitsu practitioner. And then you look at Jiri Procházka, young, hungry dog, stayed over in Ryzen. That's why he's, headlining this card, because he's massive over in Asia. He's really big over there. And, stayed over there until he was ready to come to the UFC, has 1 or 2 UFC victories, and now he's fighting for the belt. Great matchup. Super excited for it. Like you said, styles make matchups, and this is very reminiscent of the old school days of the UFC when you would have a massive big time wrestler go in there against a guy who was just great at kickboxing. So super reminiscent of that time. But I'm going to go with Jiri Procházka here. And this is the only time on this card that I've let my fan bias get a little bit of, a little ahead of me. I'm a massive fan of Jiri Procházka. He's such an interesting character. You watch his videos of him just screaming in the woods. He punches a tree 5,000 times a day. I love his style. His style is so old school, like kung fu-esque. He throws the weirdest, most awkward. It's like, in a way, it's like kung fu combined with drunken boxing. But it's so cool. He's such a fun guy to watch. He's got that goofy little fake ponytail. And I will admit, Glover could win this fight. If Jiri goes to if Glover takes Jiri down, it could be, a limb or his neck being snatched by Glover, and that's it for the fight. We saw that happen with Glover against Jan Blachowicz. But I think that Jiri Procházka, he's got way more power than a lot of other guys in this division. Sneaky power too. He's very creative. We saw that spinning back elbow against Dominic Reyes. Incredible just to end the fight right there. Glover Teixeira is going to be a lot more. His nickname is the Pitbull. He's going to be a lot more aggressive, like a Pitbull, in this fight because he doesn't want to lose his belt. But Jiri Procházka just walks guys down, bullies them, does what he wants, throws strikes all over. He'll go, some crazy looking leg kick that just demolishes somebody's calf. and then go right into like a Hadouken looking body, body jab. He's so interesting to watch. I really want Jiri to win this one. I'm a huge fan of his, like I said. I like the odds here. He's a minus 200 favorite, so Vegas kind of believes in him like I do. And either way, I'm so excited for this fight because even if he doesn't come out on top, you have to be happy for Glover Teixeira. He's a guy that went up there and tried to take this belt so many times, made push upon push, finally has it. So if he retains it, God bless him. That's great for him. But on the flip side, if Jiri Procházka wins, I'm going to be happy for my wallet as a fan. What do you think about this one, Tom? Are we going to have a super lock here?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I spent the majority of your breakdown trying to look up what the name of that so-called antenna is. Friend of the show, I believe it is called a Muay Thai. It's from Muay Thai. It is a symbolic headdress for war. Friend of the show, nicknamed Master Chief, I think also wears it after his wins. So shout out Master Chief.
Marcellus Wallace, baby.
The one and only Marcellus Wallace. That, never, that name is completely unique to him. Never, ever heard it before. Love it. But yeah, I believe it's one and the same. If it's not, I apologize. But so Jiri Procházka commits to that, puts his hair in that style. I believe we can expect to see that in this fight. Now, it's really interesting because Glover has been susceptible to uppercuts on occasion, and Jiri Procházka throws uppercuts like Marge Simpson. So, she really winds up and gets those under there. Now, here's the thing. Glover Teixeira has been known to take a shot and then somehow end up with his opponent on the ground, getting into a dominant position and winning. I mean, I think back to the Talia Santos fight where he was dominating the second round. Talia Santos comes out in the third round, hits him with a left hand, drops Glover Teixeira, then makes the mistake of following him to the ground. Out of nowhere, Glover ends up reversing the position, gets on top, and ends up choking him out and making Talia Santos tap. And that was, in the second round, I think he had him in a rear naked and the time just expired. So it's really interesting because I think as the fight goes on, the more opportunities and the more likely it is that Glover Teixeira gets a win here. I think, the odds for this fight to go the distance were like plus 300, plus 400 or something. So it's very likely to end within the time frame. I think either Jiri Procházka's power is going to be something else and be able to put Glover away without the opportunity for some ground grappling or submission wrestling at all. But I also think Jiri may have the intelligence. If I knock Glover down, like, I'm not following him down there. I'm not going to give you the ability to mess me up down there. I'm going to go down to the ground. I'm going to maybe drop an elbow, but I'm going to get right back up, or I'm not even going to follow you there. I'm going to make him get back up and see me on the feet because truly, Glover can get a shot in here or there, but the stand-up is not his forte. His forte is getting the opponent to the ground. That being said, Jiri Procházka has his hands at his side. So and does get rocked before. He got rocked by Dominic Cruz. Like, this is a guy who, because his hands are down and because he has what he calls a fight boner, he may just want to go in there with reckless abandon and with that warrior mindset that hit me, I'll hit you, and then I'm going to be the last guy standing. And that's not a style that's going to lend itself to Glover Teixeira because Glover Teixeira can pop you and then go in for the double leg. Jiri Procházka, he's a guy, he likes to change stances. He likes to switch it up. He likes to be awkward. There's a high possibility that Glover Teixeira, during one of those switch stances, is going to double leg him or single leg him, be able to get him to the ground and then have his way with him. Jiri Procházka has historically had a little bit of challenges on the ground. It's not an area where he is very well versed. And Glover, we were talking right before his last fight where he won the belt over, give me the name.
Jan Blachowicz.
I'm telling you, I need to see a neurologist. In last fight, Jan was talking about how he improved his ground game, improved his takedown defense, and Glover just made him look silly. Glover makes people with solid ground games look like they have no ground game. So Jiri, having a little bit of a suspect ground game, presents a unique opportunity for Glover. And by unique, I mean not that unique because he has this advantage over everybody. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see, is Glover's chin going to be able to hold up at the age of 42 after taking all of these shots? He has been, put away before and finished before. Is he going to be able to be finished by this guy who gets his rocks off by punching trees and enjoys it? And, I can only imagine how hard that has to make your hands and your elbows by continually punching them. There was a guy in when I was growing up, his name is blanking on me. I think it's Kobe. Carl, something with a K, but he, didn't have a lot of money and he would spend his time, he'd like to fight, would punch the lockers and punch cement. And I felt his name. He's like, oh, it makes him harder. I thought he was nuts, but ever since I've gotten into fighting, I realized that maybe there was something to that and that your punches mean a little bit more and have a little bit more impact because they're just used to being beaten on. Now, maybe you can have more, maybe that lends yourself to breaking your hands more easy, or maybe your hands are a lot more durable. I'm not a doctor. I couldn't tell you one way or the other. But in terms of picking this fight, I've presented a case for both guys. Glover Teixeira, I think if he gets us to the ground and he's going to have the opportunity to do so based on Jiri's previous fights, leaving an opportunity for a double leg, coming in wild, having his hands down, Glover being able to put a shot or two on people and combine it into a nice combination that leads to them ending up on the ground. And then Jiri Procházka with the crazy punches coming from all different angles and having that intense power that's going to potentially be able to put away a 42-year-old first-time champion. I don't know. You also have to give props to Glover Teixeira for, as soon as he won the belt over Jan Blachowicz, a fight that he wasn't supposed to win, going, Jiri Procházka, you're the guy. Like, you're next. It's like, okay, we're fighting next. And also, like, he's Uncle Glover. Like, after he beat Talia Santos, like, he like rolled him over and he like kissed him on the forehead a couple times. Like, you'll be back. You're like, he's just the nicest, warmest guy. He's another guy that if he can have, another win or two wins, you're going to look at him and be like, he's the guy that, should be the poster boy for all of the people growing up. And like, this is, your Peyton Manning. This is, the guy, your Charles Woodson, who's the good guy who like, you just want to embody. All of that being said, I'm going with Glover Teixeira.
Yeah, you're certainly right. Oh, sorry. Continue.
No, I was just going to say, and sorry for the rambling here, but I like Glover to share in this one ever so slightly. I mean, it's all going to be dependent upon his chin and dependent on how, if Jiri follows him to the ground, because eventually Glover is going to hit the ground, whether that's from a punch or from a takedown. So is Jiri going to follow him there? Is Jiri going to have a choice? I don't know. I don't think anybody can know. But I'm going with Glover. Now, I think as a fan, we can't lose. Because if Glover Teixeira wins, you have a 42-year-old champion, and I don't know why Siri's talking to me, but this video has been full of flubs. But yeah, Glover Teixeira. What was that?
Jiri. Siri thought you said Jiri, or Siri.
Oh, that's smart, actually. Yeah. Well, and they're also always listening, so either way. Glover Teixeira, I think, if you're a fan, that's the kind of guy that you could really enjoy as champion. He's not super duper marketable, but he is a good guy, and going to give you the warm and fuzzies that, hey, even at 42, 43 years old, you can accomplish your goals, and then prove that it's not a fluke. He deserves to be there. It wasn't just Jan not having it on that given night. By the way, I like your Volkanovski shirt.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this will be I'll be breaking this out again before the July 2nd card. I'm super excited.
Time, right?
Yeah, that's he's the co-main on that one against Max Holloway. That's gonna be a hell of a card. While we're talking about this, make sure you subscribe if you're watching this right now, because we'll be talking about that one come July 2nd or before July 2nd. Yeah, definitely made a great case for both of these men to win this fight. And I think another thing too that we kind of glossed over, but Jiri does have his hips out a lot when he's fighting. You mentioned the hands down at the sides. He does have sort of an up, like he has his knees bent very well, but his torso can sometimes be upright. Sometimes he does have that low stance, but I have a feeling if Glover does manage to land a takedown, it's going to be at a moment where Jiri's hips are fully exposed. And I'm hoping that Jiri comes into this one with a little bit more. He has really good fight IQ, but a little bit more of an insight as to what Glover's going to try to do with him. I can't imagine he's not going to be expecting, work on the ground and a potential submission out of Glover Teixeira. But Yeah, I think Jiri he's a puzzle on his feet, and Glover is an animal on the ground. So super excited for this one. I like that we diverged a little bit here at the end. I think, like you said, both men, there's a case for either of them winning.
And the other thing too about Glover is that a lot of fighters, when they throw punches, especially guys who are like ground specialists, when they throw punches, sometimes they leave their chin out. But Glover has a good tucked away chin, so it's going to be a little bit harder for Jiri to find that mark than maybe in the past. So a lot of these things are leaning me towards Glover. The biggest problem is him being 42 years old, having all that mileage, and Jiri, punching trees in on a mountain somehow,
Yeah.
living in a samurai hut, and really becoming one with the way of war, and just studying the art of the samurai from, I think, a young age. I think he was saying on one of the countdown shows that he was young and he was like a street fighter, and he started studying war and mixed martial art, or not mixed martial arts as a way to calm himself, which sounds like it would be counterintuitive, but in fact, I can vouch that it calms a lot of people down. So a great main card fight, a great main event here. Can't wait to find out what happens. I think either way, it's going to be exciting. We have a title reign for Glover to continue and the warm and fuzzies, or we have an absolute assassin in Jiri Procházka, ready to annihilate the division.
Sneaky fight of the year right here because of the matchup. I think, it's going to end up being so entertaining, and it's going to be a little bit longer potentially than that Charles Justin fight, which was great. Sneaky fight of the year right here, and I think that this is it's a smart move. It's going to draw a lot of fans from that part of the world in, and there's going to be a lot of highlights the day after that are going to introduce a lot of casual fans to Glover Teixeira, and in my opinion, more specifically, it's going to introduce people to Jiri Procházka, and it's going to be sensationalized. This Jiri Procházka guy. Also, quick side note before we run down our picks: Jiri Procházka meeting with Mike Tyson today. Great video. Just two absolute dogs on their feet, just two killers. Just hugging it out. That was pretty. So we'll end this video now, like we always do, with our pick rundown. So I'm gonna kick this one off for my prelim locks. I've got Andre Fiallo over Jake Matthews. I've got Brendan Allen over Jacob Malkoun. JackDella Maddalena over Ramazan Emeev. I've got Manel Nape over Rogerio Bontorin. Weili Zhang Weili over Joanna the Booby Lady Jędrzejczyk. Got Valentina Shevchenko over Talia Santos. And I'm taking Jiri Procházka over Glover Teixeira. What you got?
All right, for me, starting at the bottom, working my way up, I'm going with Reina Becquerel versus Schevchank. I am going with Andre Fiallo tailing you against the American Jake Matthews. I like Brendan Allen over Jacob Malkoun, and moving all the way up to the main card, Jake Maddalena over against Ramazan Emeev. Manel Cape Crusader over against Rogerio Bontorin. I like Zhang Weili Zhang vice versa against Joanna Six-Head Jędrzejczyk. Give me the Queen of Violence, Valentina Shevchenko over Talia Santos. And I like Uncle Glover to get it done over Jiri Procházka.
Great video today. A lot of fun as always. Thank you for tuning in. Really appreciate all you people at home sticking around this far. Please make sure that you like this video, comment down below what you think of our picks, and subscribe to the channel. We've got a lot of good content coming your way between the boys over at Picking Corners. We're going to have a couple new shows coming for you. And check out our Twitter, Instagram, @_pickinwinners, and our website for our finalized picks, as well as our Twitter handles that are down below our handsome faces. That's where you're going to find all of our finalized picks. Check out all the stuff. Oh, I didn't even say the website. That's pickandwinners.org. Check out everything Tom's doing over at Overtime Heroics. Really great stuff he's doing over there. And the stuff that we do with menoforder.com. Having a lot of fun with those guys, too. Thanks again for tuning in, and thank you for being here, Tom.
Thanks for having me, Keith, and thanks for being here, Keith, and you're welcome for having me.
Oh.